Thank you very much, Navji, for taking your time for another conversation today.
Thank
And
you for inviting me. I'm happy to participate in the ongoing discussion.
and there's still many topics which I would like to explore with you in regard to exploration of the subtle realms and bhakti. And if there's anything left from our previous discussion which you would like to add to what has already been said, maybe now is a good time to do it.
Uh, I mean, before we actually started to record this discussion, you presented me with a series of questions, maybe 7 or 8 questions, all quite thought-provoking,
Mhm.
all worthy of extended discussion.
Mhm.
Um, so before I get into any of the specific questions, I did want to sort of um, review a little bit, or at least
Yeah.
touch upon a couple of the themes from the last conversation that we had, and kind of as a lead into that discussion and a lead into this discussion, in order to let's say give it the proper framing,
Mhm.
since a lot of the questions like concern the exploration of the subtle realm, of what relevance is it to not only bhakti practitioners, but if we're taking the bhakti path here as symbolic in a way,
Mhm.
or representative in a way of the wisdom traditions in general,
Yeah.
all the mystical paths.
Right.
So of what relevance is it? How do the two things fit together in a way? This is why we started the previous discussion by framing the whole discussion in terms of the ontological question,
Mhm.
the let's say distinguishing the categories of being that are involved, in other words, subtle realm being, that it's still within the realm of Prakriti, and transcendental being, that it's is completely beyond the gunas
Mhm.
of nature. From the perspective of ontology and from the perspective of phenomenology, which is concerned with the theory of meaning, the let's say um, how how all live processes are experienced immediately within consciousness or within, the cognitive processing unit. So we have to be clear on these things because the purpose here is in a way to not advocate the path of subtle realm exploration, but to validate it. I mean, it's already in a way doesn't need validation
Mhm.
by those that are involved in it. For them,
Right.
it is self-validating. But I mean to say, because this question is here, how does it fit within the concept of the traditional wisdom traditions?
Right.
Um, so to validate it in that sense, and how it may be validated in that sense. So it was necessary to do this to first uh, that for a practitioner that does get involved, in the subtle realm exploration,
Mhm.
that they need to be clear on um, what that realm is. That this realm, in and of itself, is a subtle realm of Prakriti.
Mhm. Yes.
It is not a Nirgun realm. And the instruments, with which that realm was explored are the subtle psychic instruments of mind.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, I have a rough picture here. This is, excuse, it was just done very rough, and I'm not an artist. I don't know if this shows up or not. I was trying to represent, um, this is um, a theory, an insight
Mm-hmm.
of Saint Bonaventure, one of the Christian mystics, who described three modes of knowing, three modes of acquiring knowledge. So he referred to these as the eye of flesh,
Mm-hmm.
the eye of mind,
Mm-hmm.
and the eye of spirit. So the idea with this diagram here is here we have the the eye,
Could you
which
move it
is
a little higher? A little high. Yes. Mm-hmm.
so basically this would be the cognitive capacity, of the living being, of a human being.
Yeah.
And so the three levels of seeing,
Mm-hmm.
in our ordinary waking state consciousness, we're seeing with the eye of flesh. It means we can perceive objects of experience. We have a certain perception of time and space, even though it's not seen, these things are not seen directly, you know. And the eye of mind, although he speaks of it more in terms of the eye of reason and logic,
Yeah.
but if we extend, the range of mind,
Mm.
then the eye of mind is also the instrument by which the subtle realm, the psychic realm is gained access to through subtle, the awakening of subtle metanormal powers of mind.
So, okay, let me ask here. So, is it possible to have an experience without the mind? Because in this experience, we are not aware of mind. It's the awareness, the subjective awareness is that of pure consciousness, of not having a mind, just being, being. And sometimes, of course, having another physical surrounding, but there's no experience of mind. And we also know from people in, let's say, in coma, where the mind is not, I mean, of course, that's the brain which is not functioning. But is the mind always attached to the Atma to have these experiences?
This is why in our previous conversation,
Mhm.
we related the discussion to Kramamukti, gradual
Oh,
liberation.
yeah.
So from that perspective, it was clear, first of all, that gradual liberation takes place when let's say the perfected yogi in this case,
Mm,
um, who may be a jivan mukta, not a full jivan mukta, but at least liberated from the gross level identification.
mm,
But uh, this gradual liberation only occurs when there is apeksha, when there is a desire, a subtle desire to explore the subtle realm.
yeah.
And in that case, the 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 Atma is transported in the subtle body
Mm,
to into the subtle realms, where it can explore the realm of Prakriti, the subtle realms of Prakriti.
right.
So if we take this as the model, like essentially the exploration through subtle powers of the mind
Mm.
through the subtle body, allows one access to this subtle realm, but the Atma is still at the core of it.
Yeah.
So let's say um, there's a whole range of experience that is possible in this realm, including the possibility of um, let's say from the point of view of psychology, what they call peak experience.
Hmm. Yeah.
A peak experience is when is like a type of enlightenment experience,
Mm.
which can be again of many different varieties, according to the disposition of the practitioner. But it's understood that these type of peak experiences where there is for however long it lasts, there's a transcendence of the body mind. There's a transcendence of the identification with the body mind,
Hmm.
but then we come back to this, embodied experience.
Right.
So if these peak experiences, I'm almost finished the point. I see you maybe have another question. If these experiences are possible in sort of gross level being,
Mm.
I mean, in waking state consciousness, ordinary waking state consciousness, then it should be possible also within the subtle realm exploration, but it's not automatically given that all experience taking place in that realm is of the nature of transcendence. Not at all.
Yeah.
If we understand this from the perspective of ontology, what is the realm being experienced, and what makes possible, what instrumentation makes possible that exploration, then in its essence, it's not dealing with the realm of transcendence, but it may be possible that there are um, experiences of transcendence that are afforded even within that exploration, especially if the practitioner at the core is oriented in that way,
Hmm.
because let's say their interest is not necessarily um, the subtle realm for its own sake,
Hmm.
but um, as a support for the general path, of transcendence.
Here it gets interesting, I think. This is something which could help understand better why there, for a practitioner, for a bhakti practitioner, it could be interesting to do that, or there could be some help. But it's definitely not the path, the traditional path, but there seems to be some leeway with the right motivation or intention to get a better experience of consciousness, and to be able to perhaps transcend that which is still keeping us here in that realm, whatever um, material attachment may be still there, to have a better view on certain issues which may keep us stuck here. For example, life situations which may appear threatening or challenging can be seen from a totally different perspective if we are able to experience a different realm and see it from that perspective.
Well, I think we have to admit that our worldview is so much enlarged, from 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago,
Hmm.
in the sense that the challenge for modern day practitioners, of any wisdom tradition,
Hmm.
is to accommodate the worldview that is that we're presented with within the orientation of practice. In other words, for the modern practitioner, not that our practice in any way is dependent on a knowledge of quantum physics
Hmm.
or or this or that particular, school of psychology or on the exploration of the subtle realm that we're talking about. But nonetheless, we are exposed to all these views. And if I think of Jiva Goswami, for example, from Fire, or any commentators on any of the wisdom schools, that did um, like a huge work of integration,
Mm.
and they had to address all the philosophies of their day. In a sense, they had to account for all experience as far as it was known in their day.
Hmm.
I see this especially having worked with the Sandarbhas and the scope of topics that are explored. It was like um, building a worldview that could account for all experience.
Hmm.
So essentially now we are faced with a much larger worldview in a way,
Hmm.
but my own personal experience, of having now spent the last 20 years in translation and editing of the Sandarbhas, and also having done an extensive study of many fields of knowledge, that I found that let's say, the core um, development of ontology, um, metaphysics, epistemology, um, given in these traditions, if with a certain reframing,
Hmm.
like a certain openness, because the scripture is not, like dead something dead etched in stone. It's alive.
Hmm.
Because it's alive, it's ever disclosing, ever newly disclosing. So when new insights come, from different fields,
Hmm.
it's almost like we have to go back to the core to see now reveal yourself anew to account for this reality. Uh, what your first question today before we started was the um, sort of the fine line between heresy and tradition.
Right.
Now here's the thing: for the mystic, for the true mystic, especially if they're ground, because traditionally mystics were always grounded in some particular tradition. Now there may have been, some mystics
Mm.
that were altogether out of any tradition, but for the most part, whether you study, the Christian mystics, the Kabbalists, the Taoists, the Buddhist monks, the Vedantic mystics, from they're very firmly rooted in their scriptural tradition.
Hmm. Hmm.
They may have such a fine knowledge of that tradition, but because their whole orientation is toward the immediate disclosure, that's rooted in this understanding, but this disclosure brings a new, in a way, a new insight of a traditional, understanding that is, in a sense, so radical
Hmm.
that it's a challenge, not necessarily to the scripture itself, but to the way it's always been interpreted, by tradition. So what I'm saying is that the exploration of all these different fields now, in a way, forces us to go back and to see what new insights can be disclosed. In this vein, if it's, if it's okay, I wanted to go back to the question of karma,
Yeah.
reincarnation, and free will
Yes.
that we touched upon. Now, first of all, uh, I don't particularly like the term free will.
Mm.
I prefer to speak in terms of agency, which includes the willing capacity. The reason why I don't like the term free will, because the will as a capacity, um, is intrinsic to the living being, but it's debatable to what extent it's free.
Yeah.
In other words, um, it appears to be free to the extent that it is disidentified with the body-mind system.
Hmm.
Like the more um the more constricted our view of self and world is,
Mm.
the, the more constricted the range in which the freedom of will can be exercised. So anyway, getting back to this karma, reincarnation, and free will, because it was discussed previously, that seems to be the view of tradition,
Mm.
that that choice does not enter into the equation.
Mm.
I don't think this is the right understanding.
Okay. Yeah.
Again, if we look at the model of gradual liberation, the
Mm.
whole thing is based on choice.
Hmm.
The whole thing is based on apeksha, desire, a desire. um, to have a desire is to have the capacity, to express a choice. Now the let's say, because in this case we're talking about those who have certainly transcended gross level identification,
Mm.
but who have not entirely transcended subtle level identification. Now, the experience that you reported last time, that there seems to be a consensus of persons, individuals who have accessed these states,
Yeah.
who will report that that in looking into, I don't know, past lives, or
Between
possibly,
lives. Yeah. Between,
uh,
usually that happens between lives in that realm before taking another incarnation. It's possible to access that state
yeah.
between. Yeah.
So again, um, because it's necessarily the case that the persons reporting this have access capacities, that are um, beyond the experience of the average person. What I'm saying is that, in a certain sense, the model of the Karma Mukta, the living being eligible for gradual liberation, um, applies to the persons that are giving this report. So of course, if you have accessed these higher capacities, of course, choice, choice is accessed at a higher level. So what I'm saying is that, um, we cannot necessarily conclude, that for a person that is, um, more fully identified in grosser level consciousness, uh, there's no way to determine absolutely that choice enters into it, because the persons reporting are already vibrating at a higher level. But what this can point to,
Mm.
and this is the important point, is that, if we take this reporting as choice, entering into it, even if it's a specialized group, that are, let's say, accessing a higher level of awareness, nonetheless, from the perspective of, a priori ontological structure, if it's possible for them, then it's a possibility
Mhm.
that is inherent
Mhm.
within the ontological structure of the jiv.
Mhm.
That's what it shows,
Yeah. Okay.
you know. Now, to what extent it may be accessed, now we're not talking about ontological possibility. We're talking about, access of capacities that could make that ontological possibility into a reality. But again, here's an example where an insight that's coming through the experimentation of this realm forces us to relook at the scriptural understanding, and we find that indeed it can account for it, but it needs to be qualified in terms of what extent the choice is valid. And the final point here is that in any case, whether it's conscious or not, choice enters into it, because, as Krishna states in the Gita, that whatever whatever state of being is attained at the time of death, that to that state one will attain without fail. So the thing is, the state of being that we're talking about is in a sense the final outcome, of a lifetime of action, thought, moral involvement, and so on. So in a sense, that bhav, that final state of being, that is the accumulation of everything done in this lifetime, is inclusive, is the culmination of all our choices.
Mm.
Choice cannot to be, no, it that does not necessarily mean that, okay, the soul leaves the body, and now they're in a state, and they could as if be questioned, okay, so now where do you want to go?
Mm.
We can't comment exactly on, the extent of freedom of choice in that state, but in a sense, the state attained at the end of life is inclusive already of all choice.
Mhm.
And that will be, an influencing factor in the state to be attained.
Yeah, that is very interesting. And it seems that also hellish experiences are connected with that, or that agency and choice is also part of hellish experiences. In scripture, it seems that Jiva is completely passive, and the experience of Yamadutas coming and their various hells with experience of terrible suffering. But what I understand from different experiencers and mediums is that this experience is self-inflicted. It's not inflicted by some Yamadutas or terrible beings, but as the state of being at the time of death is that these people have an immense load of guilt and darkness. So that's exactly what they experience. They get into a realm where they are in darkness, and that suffering which they experience is an accumulation of their karma. It's not something which is coming from outside, but they themselves are in that state and are not able to transcend it until they're ready to open themselves, and then they're being brought to a different realm. These are experiences which are reported again and again. So is that possible? Is this understanding possible within our scriptural canon?
I believe it is. And the thing is, there is in the discussion of karma, I think this also came up in our previous conversation, that, sometimes karma is framed as like a kind of punishment.
Yeah,
It's not actually concerned with punishment,
yeah,
but there is certainly um, it certainly implies moral responsibility
yeah.
for our actions. And, so let's say at the time of death, these hellish realms that are spoken of, in any case, we're talking about subtle realms, or subtle experience.
Hmm.
We sort of touched on this in the last conversation when we said, um, is the exploration of the subtle realms, is this a out of body
Hmm.
experience, or is it an inner body experience? And maybe it's just two ways of looking at the same thing.
Right.
So perhaps this is a way of looking at this question as well, that um, in either case, whether we take the point of view that there's actual hellish realms,
Hmm.
but that are still within a subtle dimension, or whether it is a purely internal experience, it essentially comes to the same thing.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about here is a moral cleansing,
Hmm.
so in a way, all the trauma, like you say, all the trauma, the psychological trauma carried throughout life, all the people that we've hurt,
Hmm. Hmm.
or who have hurt us, Now this trauma, we see this even in shamanism, for example. Of course, these states can be, afforded through hallucinogenic drugs and so on
Mm.
to enter a sort of altered state of consciousness. And the shamanic journey is a healing journey at heart,
Mm.
but it can be a terrifying journey. You read the experiences of and of course archaeologically they find these shamanic caves and so on, but in the literature on shamanism, the apprentice shaman,
Mm.
you know, um, crawls into deep into the earth, into a tight cave, and may have to encounter snakes and deadly beings, and maybe ripped apart, by wolves.
Mm.
Maybe thrown into a vat of boiling oil and reconstituted, you know, from from the marrow outward. So it's described as a physically occurring experience, but it's essentially a deeply psychic experience of cleansing from the core,
Mm.
of reconstitution from the core, so and it's experienced in that way. You read of shamanic experiences where they're battling demons, but essentially these demons are the psychological, are the, let's say, archetypal forms of their own trauma,
Mhm.
that they have to encounter and in a sense uh, uh, be ripped apart, go through some hellish experience, to be reconstituted. So these themes are there, throughout the wisdom traditions. Actually, I found in my study of the Kabbalah that they tend to speak of it more in these terms, that it's the hellish realms that they speak of are spoken of more as a psychological realm.
Mm.
But nonetheless, it's experienced as very real,
Yeah.
for the person undergoing that experience.
I think some Bhagavatam commentators also interpret it as such, that it's not to be taken literally, but it's more an internal experience. But as you say, ultimately for the experiencer, there's no difference whether it's experience in an external subtle realm or whether it's an internal experience.
And also because the time frames,
Mm.
I mean, essentially, it's practically an atemporal realm,
Yeah.
so it could be a very short period of time,
Yes.
between leaving one body and entering another one could be very short
Hmm.
from our point of view, our temporal point of view.
Yeah.
It could appear like an infinite span of time
Mm.
for the person undergoing that experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
I maybe just wanted to,
Mhm.
you know, finish up today's discussion that, of course, the exploration of the subtle realm, or let's say the interest in um, the higher powers of mind. Um, it is not going to be something of relevance for all practitioners. I mean, for all those that are already involved in a wisdom tradition,
Mm.
whatever that may be. It's not going to be of relevance to all, but it as we go on, it probably will be of relevance, for a growing group, even of those practitioners of a wisdom tradition. And, for example, um, the whole realm of quantum physics is not going to be something that many um, spiritual aspirants are going to devote, years of study to, but there will be a few that who do.
Mm.
And the study of the realm disclosed by quantum physics is, um, for those individuals, is not necessarily any kind of impediment, for their spiritual practice, if they're properly oriented. And let's say, but even for the average practitioner, some understanding of quantum physics does lead to an expanded worldview in which our practice takes place. So I think the same thing is true of, this psychic realm exploration. It's not going to be relevant for
Mm.
all, but some will be drawn to it. And perhaps we have to account for the possibility that Paramatma is impelling them
Mm.
in that direction because they have some particular purpose to fulfill through the knowledge gained, in that exploration. And, this can lead to a greater integration where the core ideas that we're involved with can, let's say, find correspondence with a greater worldview,
Mhm.
because the integration has been done. Let's say the the reframing of the core ideas that we're involved in makes it possible for modern individuals whose worldview is influenced by all these
Mm.
things to it affords the possibility of a further step, of interest in transcendental being.
Would that be part of the reframing, or could you explain what that reframing entails?
Well, ultimately, I think there's a reframing that needs to take place on both sides.
Hmm.
In other words, a reframing of traditional views that can accommodate the expanded world that we're living in,
Mm.
and the let's say the insights that are exposed through various fields of knowledge.
Hmm.
So there's a reframing to accommodate all of that.
Mm.
And that reframing can also allow for a reframing of, let's say, those who are exploring, the realm of chakras and Kundalini, those that are exploring the realm of, um, subtle psychic being,
Mm.
for them to, let's say, accommodate a view, a reality view, where these things are ultimately grounded in, non-dual being.
Yes. and that this non-dual being is beyond all these realms in a
Exactly.
this
Exactly.
nirguna. I think this is the point which all of these explorers and groups are really missing, and this is something to give that understanding, to come to that point, and to even accept that there's a personal being which is beyond all that, like the source, which is a very common term, source. Nobody really wants to use the term God anymore. Source is more like all inclusive, but what that source is, and that source is beyond and can be personal. I think this is something so unique to our tradition, and this is something which would be, if that could infiltrate into these groups, that's something I think that would be a real achievement from.
Yeah, so in a sense, our let's say what we're trying to achieve here is a bridge,
Yes,
between
exactly.
non-dual being, between, the path of ultimate transcendence
Yeah.
and the realms of Prakriti, you know, which an understanding of can in some way also be a support for transcendence.
Mhm.
So perhaps we can stop here
Yes.
for today.
Thank you so much. This bridge is my mission, and I would really like to continue our conversation to go further. But I really want to thank you. I think that brought much clarification to our discussions.
Yeah, and if these conversations are well received, then we can carry on.